The Cable Easel with part 2 of a local scene in East Moriches called Harts Beach. It's a wonderful composition, and it practically paints itself. But as you all know, that I never do a scene in in less than 2 different sessions. I, of course, don't go anywhere. I've just finished doing this, but you're seeing it at a different time. Programming dictates that kind of rotation, and so here I am with part 2 of this beautiful scene, which you can go out and shoot yourself if you want to, and work at your own pace in your own place. I've talked about this before. I'm going to be coming in with a tape of some Virginia scenes, and just to show you, because I've been talking about it for a while, that you can in fact have a very effective course all your own with your own video camera, and it supports my desire to get people to work from life. I'm going to work in the distance now and work my way towards the foreground. Hopefully it'll all get accomplished, and way off here in the distance is a rather nice landscape in itself of this arrangement of trees. They look to me like they're probably Long Island cedars, and they are very typical of the North Shore and the South Shore, and they are of a particular color, which is a sort of a smoky green at different times of year. In the spring, they tend to be a little bit more brilliant than they are in the summertime, and in the fall they turn a really wonderful looking sort of coppery tone. So the cedars are one of my very favorite trees, and they also tell you immediately where you are. I do not believe that there are cedars that look like this in any other part or any other beach in the world. These are pointy, wonderful looking cedars that I'm sure that everybody is familiar with. Out here we have the distance with a it looks to me as though on that close-up there is a bulkhead that is sticking out into the water. It's not too visible on the monitor, but with the close-ups it comes approximately to here and sticks out in the water, and some lucky person has got the use of that bulkhead for the favorite water sports of Long Islanders. They really covet their coastline, and they really pay tremendous taxes in order to enjoy this particular privilege. And so be it. That's the point of living by the water, because you love the water, and nice things cost money. So here is this bulkhead, and I've got to make that a little bit more comprehensible, because if it's just a bunch of horizontal up and downs, nobody's going to understand what you're talking about. And I'm trying to give it the texture of a bulkhead, even though it's way off there in the distance, but you have to understand what you're looking at. And I do believe that there is some sand in front of it. So now I'm going to clean the brush, and I'm going to mix right there on the canvas the color of the beach. I'm going to use this quick drying white and squeeze it right onto the canvas, as I have mentioned to you once before. This is acceptable to do, and a touch of yellow ochre, but so little that you really I'm not quite sure that you have to be very, very careful, and a touch of this so-called peachy tone that I have. Sand is a color that can play dirty tricks on you. You think it's white, and then you mix a little bit of yellow, and then you realize it isn't yellow at all. So This one is particularly, the monitor shows me that it's quite yellow, as a matter of fact, and it needs to be kept extremely pale because of the brilliance of the sun. The sunshine is brilliant, and you can tell that by the very sharp shadows on the rocks. So here is a sort of it's not quite white and it's not quite yellow, and I'm going to put it in the same manner in which I did the sky. I'm going to put it on rather quickly so that I can once again repeat how important it is to work fast out here in these environments because it takes time to do these things, and the setting of the sun and the changing of the sun is not going to wait for anybody. So with a palette knife full of this pale beach color, I'm going to then refine it by showing you how the beach color becomes changed when it gets wet. But here's what I would call the background color of the beach. Now it's time for the well, I call it application of the paint with the brush. This area over here against the bulkhead probably needs to be made much more brilliant. And I'll do that later as soon as this paint sets somewhat. But here are these lovely patterns of the brilliant fingers that go off into the water. And see, I'm picking up some of the blue, and that ought to be avoided. So I'm going to pick that up. And that's what happens when you work live. You find yourself able to tell people, this is a mistake and this is how you correct it. Pick it up off the canvas, wipe the palette knife clean, and start again. Just put a nice clear tone over the area of the blue, and try and keep it thick enough so that if you pick up the color, it is not going to turn. You've already removed it. The need to be accurate is always present, but is also need to be interpretive at the same time, because you are, after all, not the Kodak lens. You are the creative person who is interpreting what the scene is offering. And the interpretation is what makes it painterly. I had an interesting seminar not too long ago with people who were talking about photographs, big photographs, as opposed to, photo murals, as opposed to paintings. And the question, of course, arose, what is the difference between a very beautiful photograph and a painting of the same scene if it is accurately done? And of course, it is the interpretation which is the important part, and it's also the fact that the photograph leaves virtually nothing to the imagination. It is all right there to be accepted without any question. Here, you will find yourself interpreting a great deal when you are applying paint to canvas. Also, you try to avoid having things too shaky, but if they are shaky, they add a certain amount of interest as well. There's always been the question of how come a photograph is impersonal, and a painting is much more personal. So it's an interesting proposal. That what is it that makes it what it is. Here is the darker part of these little fingers that are going out into the water. They have obviously become discolored because of the wet. Oops, wrong. See, I'm going to wipe that off with a palette knife. There was picking up too much color can be disastrous. When sand gets wet, all sorts of things happens. It gets darker, and it also becomes wonderfully, subtly blended with the dry part. And so that's where you find, where you have what I call the vanilla wafers look about the beach. A vanilla wafer, as you know, when you take it out of the box, it's got darker edges, and then the top mound of it is pale. And this is, and of course, you'll probably never paint this kind of a thing again without thinking about vanilla wafers. But if you ever go out to West Meadow Beach, you will find that the vanilla wafer look is out there very often. And it's the same color as those cookies, and the edges are the same color. So I'm just letting you in on some of my aberrations when I'm thinking about doing these things. Here is the wet part of the sand blending off into the dry part, making the the difference between the pale of the beach and the blue of the water, very obvious. Now here the tide has come up much higher than elsewhere, either that or it's because it's in the foreground, and it's dark, and that becomes the background to receive shiny white shells and or pebbles, and that's why layer painting is what I keep pushing, because you're not going to start working around the shells. I mean, you know, you're not going to start putting the beach in around things. You prepare the background and then you put it, then you put the things over, and then you overlay it. So here is the darker part. This is obviously some sort of flotsam and jetsam, seaweed and things that have turned very dark. And it makes for this lovely pattern that goes around the corner. This is just only slightly here, and then it becomes more interesting. Lots more stuff hanging on the water's edge. And who can resist doing this color scheme? I mean, if you were to build a living room color scheme around these colors, you probably couldn't miss. And it would be easy to live with. And so go out in nature and find out what those color schemes are, instead of flipping through magazines with some idea that some interior decorator had. Your decorating ideas are right out there at your doorstep almost, or at least down the road a piece where the landscapes become interesting. So certainly there is a need to get out there and work from life. Here is another little scallop of land outlined by the seaweed, and you never would dream that this happens unless you're out there looking at it. I have yet to see any of the other programs pointing out all of these wonderful things that happen in detail along any kind of a water's edge. It's always sort of it's indistinct, and it doesn't really come to grips with the idea of what you're looking at. Here is whatever is happening off there in the distance. Beach grass and things that are sort of clinging to the edge of this landscape before it hits the really dry and deserted beach. And these little places are full of all sorts of wonderful creatures, land creatures, of course, and very interesting tiny plants that survive sometimes very difficult winters, and then come the spring they suddenly appear as if they had not suffered one degree below 85 degrees. But this beach has gone through the severe winter, and it shows no signs of wear and tear, and it shows no signs of damage. So we live in a rather extraordinary environment here, and I'm always happy to be able to point out what it is that people should be looking for when they decide that they want to do painting of landscapes. I think I'd like to introduce a little bit more of the yellow ochre on the edge of the beaches there, and a little bit more of the blend. So I'm going to do it with a brush, and I'm going to do it with a technique which I call sort of brooming it on. And the brooming means that these bristles are going to work like a broom for me. The paint is still a little bit wet, so I can sort of blend it in, and here is a purposeful motions of the brush, which are not accidental. This is definitely a learned technique. The side of the brush is what makes this work, and I think that you can tell with this nice, amazing ability to get close-ups what is happening to this brush. This is a sable brush with long, flexible hairs, which is often said, oh, you can't use that in oil paintings, but naturally I'm about to prove to you that that's not only can you, but you must if you want to get this lovely effect. The paint is just about sort of tacky enough, and this is the quick drying white, tacky enough for me to be able to do this nice blend, and you can see that it's very logical. This to me is very convincing of what's happened. Here is along the water's edge of some more of these small and sort of unexplained dark areas. I assume that it's all got to do with flotsam and jetsam and well, whatever it is that washes up on these beaches. Unfortunately, many of the beaches are really misused by the public and by the boating crowd, and you find that in the as the season wears on, that these beaches will be tainted with all kinds of things that are thrown off or fall-off boats, everything from plastic anythings to broken pieces of equipment and wood and so on. So I kind of like to hope that my presence here on this program will help a little bit to make the public conscious of the fact that these are very beautiful areas that have to be preserved. And I have good news that up in Setauket, the legislature of Suffolk County has decided to buy a place called Detmer's Farm. You may not know what Detmer's Farm is, but you can go and find it. It's up there in Setauket. As you were running along 25A, before you come to the village of Setauket, there's a lovely farm that used to raise potatoes, cauliflowers, and strawberries. And it's been in contention for a number of years, but it is now going to be bought by Suffolk County. So, good news. I'm going to take a break. I'll be back very shortly. For the last few moments of this program, which is going to try and show you how to do rocks at this point. And I've mixed pre-mixed a color of the basic tone of what those rocks are down there. The sun is playing on them, and rocks are probably one of the more difficult things because they are so formless. There is no genuine set pattern for rocks, especially the ones that are by the waterside. They have been battered around by tides and wind and so on for X number of millions of years, and so their form is something of a problem. So what you have to do is to kind of interpret as best you can, get the basic tone, and then go from there. The base color for this one is white with some burnt sienna and some raw sienna and some raw umber and all sorts of horrid things like that. But it is essential that experimentation with the rocks is going to be in order for anybody who thinks that they want to do rocks, and they are everywhere if you're going to do a beach scene. If they don't work the first time, you have to go back and do them again. Never let it go by and say, well, that's the best I can do, because if it doesn't look like a rock, you better paint it out entirely to begin with. Don't try to pawn it off as anything else. So I'm determined to scare you to death about painting rocks, because they can be absolutely terrible looking, and they can be the ruination of a perfectly good study if you don't get the rocks right. And with that, I'm probably going to mess this up terribly as the time goes by. But obviously, this rock is being thrown into shadow on one side, and then here's another nice big sort of elephant-looking like foot down here, and was quite dark, which means that it's going to prepare me for putting down the lighter rock that is directly in front of it. So as you can see, the darkness side of a rock is extremely helpful. It's the only thing that's going to give it some three-dimensional tone. Here, this one in the front is a rather nice large boulder with a lot of darkness here. And it sort of climbs up and over here, and as I say, I hate to keep talking about it, but I need to have you hear what goes on in my mind as I'm doing these things, because all too often I have seen perfectly nice landscapes and seascapes just fall apart terribly at the end because of the inability to decipher what it is that a rock does. They are wonderful, and when you finally get them going, you really realize that they make a picture. And they certainly make for an interesting composition. So they are the challenge. That's why we try to. That's why I try to tell you about how to go about painting these things. See, here are the shadow sides of these particular boulders. And then there's always some sort of texture that's taking place that is really more interpretive. You've got to interpret these things more often than not. If you can, I'm about to do a study of rocks in a large form. I'm going to take them and enlarge them, and when I finish that composition, I'll bring it back and show it to you. And I'm kind of biting the bullet as I'm planning to do this, because I know it's extremely difficult. So do by all means, now that this the wonderful weather is upon us, it would seem to me the ideal time of year for you to decide to go on out and find a spot. Either take the camcorder with you, or find the kind of day whereby you can spend some time. I would say at least 4 hours, maybe even 5 hours at the spot itself. And in order to do that, the chances are you'll have to take some water and probably make an event out of it. Maybe even a nice afternoon where somebody else can accompany you, and they can sit and read while you paint. This has been going on in my family now for a very, very long time, and everybody seems to enjoy going out. First of all, I'm quiet as a mouse when I'm painting, and that means that they can do all the reading they want, and I won't be yammering away at them. So there is a shadow. So go see if you can go out and find some wonderful place to paint. The shadow of this rock in the water is bluish, brownish, tannish, something or other. And I hope that it becomes obvious of what this blue thing is here. But that's a nice little piece of looks that rock is throwing a nice shadow in the water. There's an awful lot more. Oh gosh, there's a rock that I didn't even see. Here it is. It's sitting out there, quite dark, and it's let me see. Okay, and then the water is flat against it. Some rock color for the top. And maybe this is just sort of give you an idea of how you can go about deciphering what it is that you see. Interpretation, that's what we're after. And here's another one, sort of another smaller one. Observation, that's what I'm after. That's what I find is necessary if you're going to attempt to paint. To copy a photograph is almost, in my opinion, a waste of time. You have to get out there and use the reference material which is right there in front of you. Here's another place for that wonderful blue shadow in the water. This rock is throwing a shadow as well. And when you see something like this on your own, the whole experience of doing a painting from life becomes the allure of what it is. All right. As the time flits by, I'm going to just show you briefly the application of small white dots, which are going to represent the stones in the foreground. The background has been prepared to receive them. This would be a question of just the discipline of doing the repetition of these dots, and maybe introduce some other colors at the same time, grays and so on, whatever it is that you see there. The best cook is the one that improvises at the last minute, and the improvisation of the last few moments of a painting should be the thing that distinguishes it from somebody else's, because you will introduce your own particular feelings about how you can express what it is that you see. But they should also be comprehensible. People should not have to say, what are those little white dots? They should tell the audience that they are in fact stones, and keep working at it until you can make it convincing. Here is the darkness of the sand continues up a little bit right out of the picture here, and the blending of this is just as vital as the blending of a sky or the blending of water. The sand needs to also give the texture that we understand sand to be. The sand also changes in color as it becomes later in the day. Many, many times the sand is of a grayish bluish tone in the late afternoon, whereas it was sort of yellow ochre earlier in the day. Don't let that frighten you. You will all observe it very someday as you proceed towards, if you do in fact decide to have any kind of an experience with painting, or if you're just using my show as entertainment, that's fine too. But some people do write to me and say that they have started painting because they've started because they have been watching the Cable Easel, and it's opened up a whole nice new world to them. Here in the last few moments, before you think that I have forgotten, way over there in the distance, and I need to show off my brand new brush, this cost $5.55. Very reasonable. It is a synthetic bristle brush, but it's going to do exactly what I want it to do. Way off here in the distance are these trees that are not yet budding, but they are they are there, and they need to be shown. So even though they're far, far away, no matter how tiny and insignificant these little leafless branches are at this point, they will tell you that is what's happening over there. This is too dark, and I can yank that off with my fingernail. So once again, my techniques are mine. You may use my techniques, but I would expect that somewhere along the line you will invent your own to do certain parts. What I'm supposed to do is to merely show you some ways of going about this business of painting landscapes. I was told that what I thought were buoys, they are actually, in fact, rather large, humongous, I think is the word, gulls, sitting here on the edge of these little jetties, and because gulls are what they are, they all have a shadow, and I don't expect this to look like a bird, but I was told that these are gulls. So we got to be raising the biggest gulls in the world. But anyway, they're sitting out there. Wildlife is a phenomenon when you can catch it in its natural place. Here are some more large rocks out there in the shallows of this composition. The light color, this time I'm putting the light color on first, and these go off into this nice blue area, and the dark ones are going to make them three-dimensional. So rocks can be actually, this is the rocks are probably one of the more important parts of this particular painting. Go on out there and try this yourself. See whether or not you are interested as I am in it. And if you're not, you haven't lost anything. You've had a nice day at the beach. You have made some observations, and you might even run into some little philosophies all your own. Well, on that note, not wanting to sound too much like a boring teacher, I hope you enjoyed what I did today. Part 2 of Harts Beach in Moriches, East Moriches, here on Long Island on the South Shore. Bye-bye. Tune me again sometime. We keep trying to be entertaining as well as instructive. So long.